Hello, Shiver Seekers. Are you ready to follow us into the unknown? I'm Cynthia.
And I'm Stephanie. You have found the Dark Oak. In today's episode, I tell you about David Bacon, the Hollywood actor best known for his role in The Masked Marvel, who died of a single stab wound to the back.
Welcome to the Dark Oak, the mystery podcast with purpose. Each month, through our charity called the Branch of Hope Foundation, we give a portion of earnings from our Patreon and sponsors to a nonprofit organization related to the first episode of the month. To find out how you can be a part of the movement, head over to thedarkoak.com or stay with us until the end of the episode and we will give you all of the details.
Cynthia, I'm pretty excited to get to recording today because we have a case update. One of our amazing listeners, Jennifer Barron, wound up reaching out to us on our Facebook page and told me about an update to our Marjorie West case. Now, remember, Marjorie West was the most mysterious case of the missing.
I do, yes.
And tragic.
Heartbreaking little girl.
Heartbreaking little girl, exactly. But remember, in that case, there was, of course, all these theories about where she could have been, what happened to her. But in the end, I talked about an author named Howard Beck. And he's a local in that area that had always heard the stories about Marjorie, really wanted to help solve that case, research that case, and he felt that he had found Marjorie. Remember the older Marjorie?
Oh, I remember, and I really wanted it to be true.
Exactly. And he claims that it was her, but for a myriad of reasons, one, not wanting to in any way defame her family, like her adopted family, because again, the theory was that she had been kidnapped for, and who knows the exact details of that, but that she had been raised under an assumed name, but then later found out that she was Marjorie. Supposedly she grew up in a very loving home, and so she didn't in any way want to cast aspersions on her family or call them out, even though, if you see a kid on the side of the road, you don't keep them. That's a general rule of thumb, I would think.
It should be. If it's not, we should make it one.
Right. But Howard Beck has taken a lot of flack for putting this theory out there because he has been unwilling to identify this woman who said she is Marjorie.
Which, I have to say, if you're going to bring these big bomb drops, you kind of have to be able to support what you're saying, ideally, right?
Sure, he wrote a whole book about it, but then the end was like, okay, well, there it is. I found her, but I'm not willing to give you any details about it.
Right.
Which is a little tough to swallow.
Sure, it is.
Well, he has come out with a second edition of his book. Remember when we originally covered this case, there was a very negative review of his book, and it was by a poster named Spider Girl. This was an Amazon review, and it basically talked about how Beck was a swindler, he was a storyteller.
And that reviewer was possibly related to the alleged Marjorie, right?
That's what we could ascertain from the review. Well, Beck has now come out with a second edition of this book, and he addresses the negative Amazon review from this Spider Girl.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
Which, first of all, I think is so nuanced and strange that he would notice that so much that he would include it in the foreword of a book. But again, one of our listeners, Jennifer, amazing. I think I even said it on our Facebook page. If you saw her, I referred to as a genius. She was able to find this book, which I was able to find because it was out of print. She was able to find an electronic version of this and sent me screenshots of the foreword of the second edition where he addresses these negative comments from Spider Girl.
Okay, so Jennifer is definitely part of the Dark Oak team, doing the research. You're amazing.
Doing the research, and I absolutely love it. I will say, while he does address it, which I do feel is very peculiar, he absolutely doubles down. Howard Beck doubles down and says, listen, I just don't care if you don't believe me. I don't care if you want to call me names. I don't care if you want to say I didn't find the real Marjorie. In the end, I know that I did. So, screw you guys, essentially. And here's the deal. Maybe he has. But there's no way for anybody to confirm it.
Sure.
And I think you and I both left that Marjorie West case feeling like I hope she really is Marjorie.
Absolutely, because it would have meant she had a great life and she was loved and she was alive. And I mean, it was probably the best of all the potential scenarios.
Potentially. I mean, but then her family, her original family, her biological family, still had to grieve the loss of a child.
Oh, there's no happy ending for them at all. But
No.
for her, I guess the best case scenario would have been that she was raised by a loving family, even though technically they would have been child abductors, but
Well,
potentially, I guess somebody would have had to have abducted her for her to get there. But you know what I'm saying. Probably best case scenario for her.
and she never even got to meet, again, if this is the real Marjorie, she never even got to meet anyone from her biological family. Remember, she supposedly came forward to Beck because she really wanted to meet Dorothea, who was her sister. Unfortunately, by the time she had come forward, Dorothea was in pretty ill health, and so they were never able to come together. So it's compelling. I mean, it certainly is compelling. He did bring forward some pretty interesting tidbits. I think it's possible it's her. But anyway, so excited when our listeners participate in our cases and get as excited about them as we get. So I love that we were able to pull up this new information and found it really interesting that he felt the need to address this negative Amazon review.
Yeah, and I really truly am amazed by Jennifer being able to find that for us and doing that search for us. So, hey, thanks so much. You're amazing.
I know.
Thanks
Absolutely.
for listening. We have the best listeners. The best listeners.
Best.
But with your storytelling, we don't have to worry about that. Like, you keep us engaged the whole time.
And I've got a really fun one today.
Okay.
I mean, it's not fun. It's murder. So that's not fun. Like, I don't want to make light of that. But this is a wily case. I just want to let you know. I want to prepare you. It's a wily case.
Well, last week's case was pretty heavy, so it's good. It'll be like a little palate cleanser, maybe?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think we could say that.
Yeah, let's
I think this is going to be, again, it's not, I don't want to use the word fun. I don't know how do you how do you combine like fun and also, murder? I don't really know how you do that.
Sure. I mean, we are still talking about the loss of life.
Yes. What I will say is the life that David Bacon led is so incredibly interesting. I think that's the part to me. His death is completely tragic, but the life he led up to that was very intriguing. And so I really enjoyed getting to understand the life that he led. And I think it's pretty fun.
All right. Well, I'm excited to hear about.
So to recap, having fun in life, good. Getting murdered, bad.
Bad.
Yeah.
We are still at the dark oak. I mean, things do tend to get a little dark around here.
A little dark.
That's why it's in our name.
All right. Well, we're going to start our journey here on the sunny evening of September 12th, 1943, when an up-and-coming Hollywood actor, best known for his role as the Masked Marvel, struggled to drive his sleek maroon British sports car down a road in Los Angeles. The car finally came to a stop, and the man, christened David Bacon by the famous Hollywood film producer Howard Hughes, exited the vehicle and stumbled only a few feet before collapsing. In his back was a single stab wound made by a 6-inch long stiletto-like blade. Some say it was a result of a love triangle, and some say he was cursed from the start. What is known is that how he came to meet his fate is still a mystery.
Okay, girl, you've pulled me in.
I gotcha.
You pulled me in.
I gotcha.
I'm envisioning a very handsome Hollywood man from the 40s.
Oh, he was.
Oh, okay.
And he wound up marrying a really amazing woman named Greta Keller. And she was a singer, a very popular singer in the 30s and 40s with this amazing, like, smoky voice. And I couldn't stop listening to her. So all week I've been listening to this like 1930s,
Good stuff.
sultry. Yeah. Really, really fun. So I kind of like got way into this episode.
Okay.
Now, Gaspar Griswold Bacon Jr., I know it's a mouthful, was born in 1914 to a prominent Boston family that traced its roots to Plymouth Rock. His grandfather attended Harvard with Teddy Roosevelt, and served as Roosevelt's Secretary of State and ambassador to France. His father was president of the Massachusetts State Senate and a lieutenant governor for the state.
Okay, so just a few civilians, just your average family. Got it.
Now, when Gaspar's career was taking off, he did change his name to David. I'm going to go into that a little later. But for the purpose of this episode, I'm just going to refer to him as David.
Okay.
Because Gaspar seems like a lot.
It does, but I like it.
After graduating from Deerfield Academy Prep School, David attended Harvard, writing and starring in productions of the famed Hasty Pudding Club and acting alongside then-President Franklin Roosevelt's youngest son, John. Are you familiar with the Hasty Pudding Club?
No.
Okay, it's basically the high society club affiliated with Harvard.
Okay.
And they call it Hasty Pudding. Hasty Pudding is an actual food, grits, but sweet. And you can put currants and raisins and things like that. But they called it that because every time they had a society meeting, they would go down the roster alphabetically, and 2 people consecutively would need to bring hasty pudding to the meetings.
Okay. I like it.
Yeah, it was a little bit of a social club. It has a little bit of a reputation because for the longest time it was like men only.
Well, it sounds very much like a Playboy type man's world.
It started out a little like that. However, in recent years, it's been pretty amazing. It's turned into co-ed. They've done some productions there, and they've even had some female presidents of the club at this point.
Okay.
Progressive, but it's, again, a social club at Harvard is essentially what it was.
I'm picturing it.
But listen, after I heard about it, I was like, I want to be part of the Hasty Pudding Club.
I just want to be in some of the productions at the Hasty
Pudding Club.
With David Bacon.
With David Bacon.
As my leading man.
After graduating from Harvard, David took off for New York. And we don't have much information about what happened during his time or why he didn't follow his family into politics after graduation. However, there are strong indications that part of the reason is because he was gay. David was able to leverage his family and friends' connections to get a screen test with Howard Hughes. Now, most people know Hughes as the eccentric billionaire who made his money with airplanes. However, he was also a movie producer and part owner of the movie studio's RKO Productions. After Howard Hughes met David at an audition, he signed him up to an exclusive contract. Some people, including David's wife, have even speculated that something more than a friendship was brewing. The stories about their involvement range from friends with benefits to like a full-fledged relationship. So this would have been incredibly scandalous at the time.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Yeah. There's nothing more to say.
There's nothing more to say that, yeah.
Yes.
Yep. Picture painted.
Yeah. Now, as Howard was helping David navigate his career path, he convinced David that he needed the new name. So Gaspar changed to David, and that he also needed a wife. David adopted the stage name of David, and then he found the perfect companion in singer Greta Keller. Greta would later reveal the union was perfect because they were both gay.
Oh, okay.
And we will see through this episode, the relationship between Greta and David may not have been romantic, but I can absolutely tell you that Greta loved David very much. And I believe the feeling was mutual. And shortly after their wedding, Greta became pregnant.
Okay, well, all right.
So all that to say, I think they were truly planning a life together.
They were maybe best friends. They loved each other while also retaining other interests.
They absolutely did. I think that's absolutely the picture to paint. So when I say, I don't want to make this like a marriage out of convenience, because I really do believe they cared very much for each other. Now, David, of course, was tall, dark, and handsome, just as you envisioned. David was described as the next Henry Fonda. And for those of us who were not alive in the 30s, this is Jane Fonda's father, and he is very handsome as well. But it turned out at this time in Hollywood, there was a leading man shortage, which I did not know was a thing, but apparently it was. And so this fresh-faced David was like, I've arrived. I'm here. I'm the guy.
Well, I can tell you in the theater world, there's a leading man shortage just in general. The ratio between like men who want to do theater to women who want to do theater, it's always harder to cast male roles.
Interesting.
Mhm.
Well, there you have it.
Yeah.
There you go. Now, David landed roles in 5 movies altogether before scoring what he hoped would be his breakthrough in The Masked Marvel. Now, this was a 12-episode Republic Studios serial as an action spectacular that also served as an era-typical wartime propaganda. So remember what we're doing. This is after World War I, before World War II. So from what I can tell, a serial is like the equivalent of our version of like a limited series.
That's what I would assume just from what you've described.
Yeah. And in this show, David played the hero who was trying to take down the Japanese spy and saboteur named Mora Tsukima.
All right. I'm in. I'm watching.
And this villain could be described as one note. He literally was this guy blowing up things in hopes of spoiling the Allied forces, supplies, and causing like the United States war production to break down. These were not complicated rules.
They were not burying the lead in any way. They were.
This is a pretty straightforward.
He's just the villain.
He's a villain.
Okay.
He is a villainous villain.
Okay.
That's what he is. Now, the big twist was that neither the characters nor the viewers knew the identity of the handsome leading actor until the very last scene of the series, when unassuming insurance agent Bob Barton, of course played by David, took off his mask to reveal himself as the mysterious crime-fighting hero.
I love it. I love it.
I'm in.
I hope that while watching the series, people had absolutely no idea. Like, I hope it just blew their socks off.
I hope so, too. Unfortunately, this is when I tell you the sad part. 2 weeks after filming the unveiling scene, David would be dead.
Oh, man.
Rough. Here's where the story really starts to get weird. The masked Marvel character who protected people from harm had been known as a cursed role. In fact, David only got the role of Bob Barton, the masked Marvel, after 4 other actors were injured. Another time, during the filming of a particularly intense fight scene, every single actor participating was hurt except for David. He was heard joking while leaving the set, saying, "I better look out or something might happen to me. I'll probably get hurt going home in my car tonight."
Ew, okay, that is creepy, given how you began this episode.
Creepy. And then there was this bizarre tidbit. David was not the only actor with the last name of Bacon playing an insurance agent in The Masked Marvel who perished prematurely. Rob Bacon, no relation to David, who played Jim Arnold in the serial, died 5 years later in 1948 at the age of 33.
So maybe it was like a whole cursed production, like Poltergeist, like Glee, like even The Wizard of Oz.
There's been some speculation that something weird was brewing over there. Okay, so let's fast forward to September 1943, the weekend of David's murder. It began with a dinner party that Friday night. David and Greta, who was 5 months pregnant at the time, hosted a soiree that included cocktails for 150 guests, followed by a sit-down supper for 50 at Castle Hill, their home in the Hollywood Hills.
Oh, what a life. What a life.
What a life. Greta, who I've already said I adore, joked that she sang in 4 languages, which, by the way, she did. She sang in 4 languages, but she cooked in 14. She made a traditional Viennese dish, Buchel with dumplings.
That sounds so good right now. I'm really hungry.
We're getting lunch after this,
okay.
Cynthia. The next evening, David returned the favor by serving his gourmet chef wife his 2 signature dishes, omelets and Jell-O.
Well, that rings true, doesn't it? Like just a little bit. She cooks in 14 languages. He makes omelets and Jell-O.
And Jell-O. He's good looking though.
You know what? I was just gonna say, at least he's cute.
Later in her biography, Greta wrote, quote, "He loved Jell-O and I hated it, but I always had to eat it anyway." Sweet.
Good enough looking man. I'll eat all the Jell-O you want.
That Sunday morning, the 12th, was a hot, muggy day. While David and Greta were eating breakfast, David suggested that they go to the beach. Greta initially thought it was a great idea, but then remembered her doctor's warnings. She was in the second trimester of a very difficult pregnancy, and her doctor had advised her to stay home and rest. So instead, the couple spent the day writing letters, eventually lying down to take a nap together. When Greta woke up, her husband was gone. He had left her a note saying he had gone to the beach and would be back before dark. Nobody knows exactly where David went that afternoon, who he was with, or why anyone would want to murder him, but at the end of the day, he would be dead. The next we know of David is what I recounted at the beginning of this episode. He was seen by multiple witnesses attempting to drive his sports car in the final moments of his life. At 5 p.m., 12-year-old Lorraine Smith happened to look out her window and notice David's burgundy Austin sports car heading east on Washington Boulevard. But something didn't look right. The car was bumping and bouncing across the road that ran parallel to her home, narrowly avoiding crashing into a telephone pole before jumping the curb and finally landing in a bean field. Lorraine grabs her telescope to look closer, and what she sees is David, dressed only in blue bathing suit trunks, opening the driver's car door, stumbling 15 feet and falling to the ground, covered in blood. Another witness, a man named Wayne Powell, who had witnessed the crash, rushed to the scene. As Wayne approached the helpless, half-naked, bloody man, he heard him cry, "Help me, please help me." 10 minutes later, David was dead. The LAPD was called to the very bizarre scene where they collected evidence from David's body and car. Upon first examination, police found that David had a solitary stiletto-shaped wound in his back. After the autopsy, medical examiner Frank Webb surmised that David was possibly stabbed with a stiletto while he was leaning forward, possibly releasing the parking brake, but there was no sign of a struggle in the car. And I want to pause here for a moment, because when I first started learning about this case and picturing David being stabbed, every time I read stiletto, I pictured him being stabbed with a very pointy heel.
Okay, that's exactly what I'm picturing.
Okay. I felt like I needed to clarify here. So, as we go through suspects, there were so many like male suspects, and I was like, why were they wearing high heels? Okay, it's not a stiletto shoe. Stiletto shoes were named after, or stiletto heels, rather. Stiletto heels were named after a particular type of weapon. That is a very long, pointy dagger.
Okay, you know what? As you said that, I'm like, oh, wait a minute. It's also a knife. Okay.
Yes. The stiletto heel got its name from the weapon called a stiletto. It was a specialized dagger with a long, slender blade and a needle-like point, primarily intended as a stabbing weapon. Think old school ice pick, like the dangerous ice picks, except with like a fancier handle. So while the image of someone actually dying as the result of a high heel stabbing to the back is certainly interesting, that is not at all what happened here. And what did happen is obviously very, very scary and very, very sad. David was still wearing a valuable ring, and he had $13 along with his Screen Actors Guild card in his wallet when he died. So money was ruled out as a likely motive.
So not a robbery. And he's dressed in swim trunks as if he was in fact coming from the beach.
That's right.
And no shirt on, right? Just the swim trunks?
Correct.
And you would only drive. I already have like my own I already have a theory. I have a theory.
Okay. Well,
let's see if I'm on the right path when you tell us
I want
more.
to see exactly. I'm gonna keep looking at your face as I give you more details and see if you're on it.
Mm-hmm.
The car looked like something out of a movie, complete with a steering wheel soaked in blood and bloody handprints on the driver's side window. Inside the vehicle, there was a blood-soaked bathrobe, but it didn't have a knife hole. So detectives deduced that David wasn't wearing it the time he was murdered. Maybe possibly he was just sitting on top of it. They also found a blue sweater that was much too small for David to wear. Police also found a camera in the car. Once the film was developed, there was only one photo. One of David naked on the beach. A woman who lived across the street from the crash told police that she was certain she saw a black-haired man in the passenger seat. Police officers dusted the car for fingerprints in the hopes of getting a lead, but the only fingerprints they found in the car belonged to David. Because of the angle of the knife wound, the medical inspector theorized that the killer was left-handed and not very tall. He said because of the way the knife punctured David's lung, David could have driven as far as 20 minutes before he died, giving his assailant plenty of time to bail out of the car before the crash or just leave the crime scene. After the incident, newspaper headlines went crazy, publishing each new twist and turn in the case, and I will tell you, there are many. For example, Greta, desperate to do anything she could to help catch David's killer, gave investigators David's diary, which they were shocked to find out was written in secret code. It appeared to be fashioned like the coded diary that David's character had examined in an episode of The Masked Marvel.
So that's intriguing, but if he really was living a lifestyle that wasn't approved of at the time, and we know that the homosexual lifestyle at the time was strictly forbidden and looked down upon, I can see why he might not want to make that easily readable. And then also, even recently, celebrities have to be concerned that their sexuality, their lifestyle could come back and make them not hireable, quite frankly.
That's certainly a reasonable theory.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So just off the top of my head, I would say that's why his diary's in code.
There is also the issue of the secret will. Just days after his death, David's cousin uncovered and filed a will that David had handwritten 3 months before the crash. It was dated June 14th, and the will was written in pencil on a piece of onion skin paper, which is basically just like a see-through piece of paper. It left everything to Greta, which is not a surprise. But there were some questions as to why he didn't have the will recorded or at least have consulted an attorney. Greta later explained in notes from her biography that she remembers the night David penned the will. One evening, he had refused to come to bed until the will was complete, even though he had to get up to film early the next morning. He told her he was jumping off a second-story building during filming and he wanted a will just in case something went wrong. But many have wondered if David knew more, like he knew there was some threat against his life. I mean, he was only 29 years old. Now, I did kind of look at his life overall, and his wife had just become pregnant, so maybe he was feeling a little bit more protective. I don't know. But it does seem strange that he would have written this will and then just left it bunched up in his papers and not done anything with it.
And see, to me, it actually kind of points to the fact that maybe he just wrote it up because he knew he was getting ready to jump off a second-story building and was like, just in case anything happens to me. And then I'm assuming he jumped off the building and everything went well.
Exactly. He's like, well, I don't need that.
Right. And then he just kind of forgot about it. All right. That's kind of where I land with that.
That's a plausible theory. Then there was the issue of David's car. Shortly before David died, the roof of his Cadillac convertible had been shredded, apparently slashed with a knife. Greta told police that her husband never gave her a straight story about what had happened. One day, he said he was in the car while someone knifed it. Another time, he said it happened while he was at the studio. Regardless, David traded the vehicle for a used Rolls-Royce and the small British-made Austin sports car in which he would later be killed. And then there was the apartment. Police discovered that David had rented a small studio apartment in Laurel Canyon a few weeks before his death. He had a key to the apartment in his wallet when he died. Greta said she helped her husband pick out the apartment. Then they advertised it in the paper for a carpenter to help David execute plans to expand their home in exchange for a place to live. Like, you work on our home and I'll give you room and board.
Okay, so maybe the apartment was just the payment.
Possibly. And
I was thinking maybe a rendezvous location.
a love nest.
It's kind of where my mind went. It's kind of where my mind's going. Like, everything you're telling me is kind of saying, okay, like, I see what's happening here.
Maybe. Now, an upstairs neighbor, like upstairs to the new apartment that he had rented, was another actor named Leslie Dennison. And Leslie informed investigators that he never noticed anyone in the apartment except for the day of the murder. Meanwhile, the landlord, Charles Hendricks, told police that he was driving by the building 2 days before David died and saw a light on, so he stopped to collect the $20 for rent. David said he didn't have the cash on him, but promised to leave it in the landlord's mailbox the next morning, which he did. But the landlord saw that David was not alone. Quote, there was another man with Mr. Bacon. He was dark and slight, foreign-looking, and his face was flushed like he was angry. All the time I was there, he never spoke a word, nor did Mr. Bacon introduce me to him. The police announced that they were searching for the individual David's landlord had met. Captain Thad Brown of the Los Angeles Police Department's homicide squad told reporters, quote, this man should have come forward by now with an explanation, unless he's left town. Many have speculated that the man that the landlord saw was a possible lover of David's, but there's been nothing to substantiate that rumor.
My theory is already he was in bed with the wrong guy.
It's probably likely, but which guy is the issue?
Right.
After David's death, the only thing found in the apartment were dirty dishes, coffee, spaghetti, and some books. So you're not getting any information out of that apartment.
Right. Except for, I don't know that David cooked because he doesn't make spaghetti. He makes omelets.
Oh, very astute. Yeah, it's true.
Now, how hard is spaghetti to make? You know what I mean? So is it just that omelets were his specialty, but he could from time to time boil some pasta and open a jar? I don't know, do they have jars of pasta back in the 40s?
I don't know. You could squish a tomato. It'll be fine.
But you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I do find that interesting because...
Or maybe Greta packed him a to-go box.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah.
Very supportive wife.
She is. She's fantastic. Several days later, on September 21st, a 22-year-old man named Blakely Clifford Patterson gave an exclusive interview to the Los Angeles Examiner, saying he knew exactly who'd murdered his friend, David Bacon, and he believed he was next. He said, quote, I have a feeling that if this man is still in Los Angeles, he'll get me too, that my days are numbered. He might kill me just to silence me, end quote. Patterson, who worked as a hospital orderly, had recently moved to Hollywood. He said he first encountered David at the beach and they became fast friends. He recalled that one day he and Bacon met with a mystery man at a downtown hotel. Quote, the man seemed to be very angry at David. Patterson told reporters that Bacon phoned him in a panic around 11 a.m. on the morning he was murdered, saying that the man had written a threatening letter demanding money. Quote, he seemed puzzled and nervous and I didn't know what to make of it. David begged Patterson to go with him to the beach to meet the man, but Patterson responded that he couldn't because he had to work. The actor promised to call the next morning, but he was killed later that day. Investigators were thrilled to learn that they had an eyewitness who could possibly identify David's killer. Unfortunately, this would prove fruitless, as Patterson was unable to even describe his supposedly very good friend, David Bacon. After figuring out his story was blown, Patterson recanted everything, telling the police he'd made the whole thing up, admitting that he never even met David. He was quoted as saying in the Los Angeles Times, quote, I thought I could get into the movies if I had my picture in the paper. He was arrested and charged with making false police reports and spent 10 days in jail before returning to his hometown of Hibbing, Minnesota on judge's orders. You know what this made me think of was in our Amy Jo Bradley case, where that con man just totally took advantage of her family.
Yeah. Just
it feels like just false hope.
Taking advantage of just people, humans.
Loved ones.
Yeah.
For your own gain.
Yeah. No, it's terrible. Terrible.
Another man, 23-year-old Charles R. Weil, also came forward saying he had killed David. But police let him go after questioning, saying that they didn't believe he, like Patterson, had ever even met David. But this was not the last we would hear of Weil. A month later, he was arrested after attacking a neighbor with a butcher knife, and during his time in custody, Weil told a Santa Monica police officer that he had murdered the actor. When detectives questioned Weil a second time the next morning, he said he was drunk and denied his previous confession. Due to the amount of discrepancies, he was once again cleared. So this is a man that has now confessed and been questioned twice in the death of a man that he probably never even met.
I don't get the false confessions, but we know that there's lots of people out there who, like to confess to murders and other violent crimes they didn't commit. So,
Yeah.
I don't get it.
Well, after the police ruled out these buffoons, the police decided to concentrate their efforts on some real evidence. So they started honing in on this blue crew neck sweater that was found in David's car. Remember the one that was very
Small.
much too small to fit
Mhm.
David, exactly. Detective noticed again that there was no way it would have fit the 6 foot 2 inch tall David. Police sent the sweater to a crime lab and found blonde hairs around the collar and 3 small feathers that appeared as though they might have belonged to a seagull. I know, which I thought was actually pretty incredible detective work for the 40s.
Yeah.
Like, how do you know that? That's so random. As a person who has many, many different species of birds
Oh,
on my
yeah.
farm, I mean, I can look at feathers, but sometimes I can say, like, that came from a duck, that came from a chicken, that came from a pigeon, but not always.
And would you be able to tell the difference between a white seagull, let's say, and another one of your white animal or birds?
Maybe. I really haven't paid attention to seagull feathers, but I do feel like this is a very strange detail.
They do have like a brown, they are like white with like a brown tip.
And maybe that's it. Maybe just the coloration of the feathers. Maybe there's a special coloration. I mean, I don't think they were like DNA testing feathers at that time, but for whatever reason, they felt pretty confident that these were seagull feathers.
All right, I like it.
Yeah. Law enforcement determined that the sweater looked a lot like the kind sailors wore. So they started questioning Army-Navy stores along the coast in an attempt to find the owner. Police searched specifically for a man who was about 5'8" and blonde and weighed about 140 pounds. LAPD's Detective Lieutenant Harry Friedmont said, quote, "We are convinced the sweater belongs to David's assailant." And then a connection was made. A 20-year-old Navy deserter, Glenn Erwin Sham, had been hired by David as a gardener 2 weeks before the murder. However, the actor then canceled the job days before his death. Sham was arrested and taken in for questioning. However, there was a problem. Sham had an alibi. The deserter couldn't have murdered David because he spent all day Sunday with his wife, which other witnesses confirmed.
Oh, okay. I was
If it was
I had
just the
hope for
wife,
a minute, yeah.
if it was just the wife that confirmed his alibi, I'd say, that's fishy. But the fact that other witnesses saw him.
Yeah, and you could even say motive, not a good one, but motive, like you hired me and then canceled the job. I mean, that's not a good motive to kill somebody, but
That's
you know what I
right.
mean? It's
That's
not
true.
like completely without motive.
Sure. If the police did have any other leads, they were never made public. The Boston Globe reported, quote, "Detectives who studied reports and questioned everybody who ever knew Bacon admitted they were certain of nothing." End quote.
Wow.
And if that doesn't deflate your case, I don't know what would.
And it's a high profile case.
Yeah.
This is probably getting the best of the best
Right.
of attention,
Right. And before you attempt to ask about any DNA, I will go ahead and tell you that in an interview with reporters, the police admitted that they made one small, itsy bitsy, teeny weeny mistake. They allowed David's body to be embalmed before officers examined it or ran any forensic tests. Oopsie.
Yeah, just a tiny little misstep.
Oops. So at this point, officers aren't sure if David was murdered by a close friend or it could have literally been a complete stranger, as at the time, they even theorized it could be a hitchhiker because the actor was known to give pedestrians rides.
Oh.
Which is a whole nother door.
It is, except I don't see the motive unless you're just mentally, I guess,
That's true.
unbalanced because they didn't take the money, they didn't take the car. I just want to murder somebody, I guess, potentially, but
I don't know. I don't know much about stabbings with stilettos, but that seems very personal to me. That seems like, first of all, who just carries around a stiletto?
well, I don't know. I might if I were a man, a gentleman, back in like the 40s, when I assume these things are less regulated than they are now. Now we have metal detectors and like,
Okay,
I've got to take my Swiss Army knife out of my purse. But I don't know. Back then, would I carry a stiletto? Yeah, I might. If it was like a thing that was ever done, I'm the kind of person, I would do it now. Like, I'll be honest, I would do it now. If people were just carrying stilettos around, I would.
Wait, do you have the cat ear knuckle cuffs that go in your keychain?
I don't presently, but I have absolutely had stuff like that before. My car's full of the seatbelt cutters and the window breakers and the flare guns and the Swiss Army knife and all that. So I am one of those who tends to just kind of be like, you know what? This won't hurt for me to carry.
Okay, so actually, I do have that. I have like the multi-tool that's used for like escaping your car if you're ever in water.
Yeah.
I figured that's valuable here in Florida.
But like I have gone through periods of my life where I've literally carried like a Swiss Army knife on my person.
Okay, get wily.
Well, I mean, does this surprise you? The way I think? Does this surprise you that I'm gonna carry this knife that I have that is not gonna hurt anybody? It's not gonna do anything. What I'm gonna do? Take the tiny little scissors and be like, step back. But yet, to carry it makes me feel better.
I like the multi-tool part of a Swiss Army knife. I like to just be prepared, So I would use like the screwdriver and stuff. I don't know if I'd use the knife. To each their own, I suppose. To
each their own.
That's why it's multi-tooled for multiple purposes.
Yes, absolutely.
Meeting the needs of all the people.
But you're saying you don't think I would be drawn to the stiletto. I think I'd carry one.
No, I feel like unless you are literally wait, I'm going to go look back in my notes. Give me a minute. No, I think unless you are literally the villain Mora Tsukima from the Masked Marvel, then no, you should not be carrying a stiletto.
Don't blow my cover, Stephanie. Gosh.
You are over there twiddling your long curly mustache, so that could... Brilliant. Film historian Greg Mank, who included a chapter about David in his book about David's co-star, Lard Krager, wrote, quote, "Somebody got away with killing somebody with a knife in broad daylight."
That's the thing that kind of gets me is, okay, so here's what I'm imagining. Can I kind of give my theory so far, my like working theory? I feel like he did go to the beach because the way he was dressed. I feel like maybe he met somebody there, either intentionally, like he had made plans to meet somebody, or just through happenstance. Maybe there was some kind of a interaction, and then this person stabbed him, and then he got back in his car bleeding. It would explain why he didn't put a shirt on, because I would think, getting out of the beach, I'm gonna at least I might wear my bathing suit home from the pool or the beach,
sure,
but I'm gonna probably throw something over it. I'm not gonna just drive shirtless in I'm assuming maybe leather interior sports car.
Very fancy car.
Right. The fact that he didn't do that makes me think that, one, he was either coming out of maybe a more intimate type of interaction when something happened, or he's just rushing to get off the beach and get in his car and get to help. And then everything we saw in the car is him just trying to get somewhere where he can get assistance.
I think both of those are very reasonable theories, for sure.
That's where I'm at. Now, I'm assuming gentleman was, that I don't know yet.
All right, fair enough. This part is incredibly sad. I'm just warning you. Shortly after David's death, Greta delivered a stillborn baby.
From the stress, probably?
It was. She went into severe depression and was essentially catatonic. And so 2 weeks later, she just went into labor and unfortunately delivered a stillborn baby. And most people at this time left her alone as she grieved for her husband, who was her best friend.
Sure.
And her child.
Who also was the last piece she had of her husband.
Right.
So, it's almost like it's just like being hit from all directions.
The layers
of loss.
Unimaginable.
Yeah. Oh, man. That's awful.
But in her recovery, she mentioned a theory several times about who she thought might have been responsible for her husband's murder. It was David's old boss, Howard Hughes.
Oh, well, that took a turn I hadn't foreseen.
Well, let's hear her theory.
Yeah.
She alleged that two men had engaged in a sexual relationship, and the billionaire was not pleased that David wanted to end the affair. Rumors popped up about Hughes also being dismayed at how fast Greta had gotten pregnant, though he was the one who had supported the marriage in the first place, so I don't know that that holds a ton of weight. Maybe he simply wanted them to be like roommates. He didn't actually plan for them to have a life together.
Sure. If you're encouraging your lover to marry somebody, you might just think it's just, a marriage of convenience. And to then find out that it was more than that, I guess if you're the jealous type, could conceivably be bothersome.
Sure. Greta also theorized that Hughes was much too rich and too smart to commit the murder himself. Instead, he hired a professional hitman to take out his former lover before anything leaked out about their tryst and for what he perceived as rejection. While Greta's theory didn't seem to stand the test of time, as she was the only one really promoting this theory, it is obvious that she spent her entire life grieving the loss of her dear David. Of his killing, she said, quote, "I cannot find peace. I keep thinking it should be me that's dead, not him."
Oh.
After the miscarriage, Greta invited detectives to her hospital room. Hospital room.
Fresh.
Yes. And suggested where they should look and whom to call. Quote, "I said, I'll give up my fortune. I want to find the killer. I called the detectives 1 or 2 times. I said, look here, look there. They said, do you know what happened? I said, I have no idea." Greta even went so far as to hire a New York law firm to investigate the stabbing, but they were never able to solve the case either. In an interview almost 10 years after his death, she said, quote, "I can't rest until I find the murderer. David was just a big, lovable kid. Nobody could help liking him. And how could anyone kill him?" Greta never remarried, and most of the relationships she had were with men who either looked like David or somehow reminded her of him. Wolfgang Nebmier, who was in a relationship with Greta from 1973 until she died of liver cancer in November of 1977, said, quote, "Greta was absolutely gaga about that man." The singer never quit searching for her husband's killer, but she never found an answer. And she never watched The Masked Marvel. She said, quote, "I think I would have not survived seeing him before me on the screen and not in reality anymore." As for David's other family members, no one ever gave an interview, and they never spoke to one another about his death, which I find to be incredibly sad. To me, this is an indication that they didn't approve of his lifestyle.
That it's always sad to me when I hear or believe that people can't just live their lives authentically. That just kind of breaks my heart always.
I think what matters is just that you love people.
Yes.
That's the end.
Yeah.
Just love people.
Right.
When David's life came to a tragic end in that Venice bean field on September 12th, 1943, his final feature film was playing in theaters. The title, Someone to Remember.
Oh, I got chills again.
Still, over 80 years later, the case is not closed. A spokesperson for the LAPD told Entertainment Weekly, quote, "It is an open case. At this time, we are not commenting any further."
Oh my gosh. So that truly is like a mystery.
Wild.
A mystery. Wow. I think it was a jilted lover, or that's where my mind goes. I think it was a jilted lover. I don't know the why and the how.
Yeah, I think, unfortunately, having to kind of live in the shadows and this kind of lifestyle, I think made him more susceptible to this kind of violence.
To hate crimes, really. I mean, I don't think we knew them as hate crimes back then, but this could have been a hate crime. Of course,
sure,
that may not ring true if it's a jilted lover, but something to do with the lifestyle, I feel like. Because I do feel like there's enough stuff that kind of points to him maybe living a lifestyle that wasn't accepted at the time openly, just when you put it all together.
And there were a lot of rumors that time he spent in New York when we don't really know a lot of what was going on. There were some ideas of a lot of secrets,
sure.
a lot of unsavory characters coming in and out of his life and those kinds of things. I think just the way he had to operate in this world brought him in very close contact with shadiness, seediness, keeping secrets, not being open.
Anytime you have to hide,
Right.
even if what you're having to hide is not in and of itself a negative thing, they're secrets. So maybe what he was hiding was, just a lifestyle, but there were probably other people who were around him who had more than just that to hide.
That's kind of what I think, which is very unfortunate. And gosh, what a treasure Greta is. Like
I can't wait to look her up.
And listen to her music. We'll
Yes.
listen to her music while we eat lunch.
Yeah. I would definitely.
Greta Keller. There's a few YouTube videos, and incredibly, it's like it's not like stop motion, but it's it's a 1930s film, but you can see her singing. And anyway,
I love it.
She's a lovely person. She really is, and she continued to sing. I think I saw one where she was singing into the 1960s.
Okay.
So,
flourishing career.
Yeah, a little starlet.
Oh,
So,
I love it.
well, we are in the month of September, and we have a fantastic Branch of Hope Foundation that we're sponsoring for the month of September. You want me to
tell us about it? Yes.
All right. We are sponsoring Q, Center for Missing Persons, that was covered in our Ebony Spears case at the beginning of the month. Ebony Spears was a beautiful 30-year-old girl who disappeared from her home in Wilmington, North Carolina. As it turns out, Q, Center for Missing Persons, was an instrumental part of the search party for Ebony. Unfortunately, Ebony has not been found, so I encourage you to listen to that case because Cynthia and I both feel like that one could possibly be solved.
I really feel like that one could absolutely be solved if it gets in front of the right person.
Yeah. And Q was originally founded in Wilmington, North Carolina. Now they help aid in searches across the country, but we thought they were a fantastic nonprofit for us to partner with this month. So any proceeds from our Patreon, from our sponsors, any direct donations will all go straight to Q this month. If you want to donate directly, you can find their information on our website. You can also find their information on our Facebook page. You can join our Patreon and know that you're doing something good. And also, we're building a little library of cases over there. Go check them out. Also, some freebies over there. You can do a live chat with us. We have our Friends of the Dark Oak Facebook page where you can do some chats with Cynthia and I. You can reach us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. You can also reach us at thedarkoakpodcast@gmail.com. We love your comments. We love your questions. Send us a little note like Jennifer did. Tell us all the little clues that we might have missed. We love that. It really takes a village, guys.
Oh, it totally does. And we'll give you a shout out if you do.
Well, of course. They're like co-authors of these amazing episodes. Yeah. Be sure to follow us to our next episode where we will give you another spine-tingling, shiver-inducing mystery episode. Woo-hoo! Oh, that reminds me. We're getting close to Oktoberfest.
Oh, we are. How did we almost forget to say that?
I don't know, because I am totally getting geared up. I'm thinking about actually decorating the house before we start recording for Oktoberfest.
Absolutely should.
Yeah. If you guys don't know, Oktoberfest is the Dark Oak celebration of all things October/Halloween /spooky. So you got to come back. We give you a little campfire story. We tell you it's a mystery, but a little Halloween-y type mystery.
Yeah, so we still bring the same format, but there might be, it might be a little more of like a Halloween-y themey.
Oh, no, she didn't. Oh, no, she didn't.
And on that note, ladies and gentlemen, good night.
Oh, but for real, guys, it's like the best celebration of October and spooky season ever. So make sure it's going to be in the same time, still on Wednesday, but it's just a little bit of we've got some little theme music and some fun stuff. So anyway, definitely make sure that you come back for the first week in October for that. But for now, help support Q, help us find some missing people, send us a message. We love you guys.
We sure do.
We'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
This episode of The Dark Oak was created, researched, written, recorded, hosted, edited, published, and marketed by Cynthia and Stephanie of Just Us Gals Productions, and made possible by you, our shiver-seeking listener. Special thanks goes to Justice Himes for our incredible artwork and Ryan Crete for our amazing music.